The following program contains shocking portrayals of action. If you suffer from cowardice, Randall may not be right for you. Check with your video game supplier.
Proclaiming the truth in the highways and byways of the world. Fighting for justice in the dark alleys of politics. Raising the voice of resistance to a fevered pitch. And he knows where to find the best and worst jail food in America. Randall Terry.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is I, your servants, Randall, caustic only to the unlearned. The truth hurts, baby. We're going to have a great show for you today. I love you. I love you. I love you. And we have so much to talk about. We are going straight into history. Yes, not contemporary issues, history. Starting with the Stamp Act. Ooh, the Stamp Act? Yes, the Stamp Act. What's it all about, Alfie, and how does it affect you as an American? Next, the Boston Tea Party. You Tea Party people are riding a big wave, and if you're going to steal that great big name, you better be ready to live up to it. Today's program brought to you in part by the Stamp Act, where British tyrants mobilized political freedom fighters to fight for a free nation. And by the Boston Tea Party, destroying private property for the glory of freedom. Oh, I'll tell you what it's all about, Alfie, in a minute. But first, a word from Joey, the Hammer.
You Tea Party people need to listen closely to me. On the night that they destroyed the tea in the Boston Harbor, it was close to $1 million in today's money of personal property. If they had in fact been captured by the British, they would have done some serious time. Some of them might have even have been executed. So if you take a name like Tea Party, you better be willing to pay the price. Otherwise, you're just stealing somebody else's hard work and making a mockery of everything they did.
Hi, friend, I'm Randall Terry. The main purpose of this program, frankly, is to get you and me out of the cyber ghetto, out of our little safe enclaves, and into the real battle so that we can get this country back into the hands of righteous men and women. In a word, social revolution. Well, if you want to win, why not go to the playbooks of the past where people prevailed? I recently filmed a TV series on the history and the philosophy and the theology of social revolution in America. It's called Insurrecta Next. We decided for the next few days to play segments of that series for you, and I'm promising you, you're going to love it. And if you adopt these lessons, you will become a dread force in the culture wars. Let me begin with the Stamp Act. Enjoy it. Welcome. Thank you so much for letting me in your home. I want to tell you something. I've been recruiting people to battle for a long time. And our mission here is to recruit, to train, to unleash the next generation of social revolutionaries who literally obliterate legalized child killing from America and then around the world, should God let us be the first nation after Poland to be victorious. Now, think about that phrase. It is easier to temper a bold man than to embolden a timid man. I've spent a lot of time recruiting people over the years, and what I have found is if I get somebody who's got passion, fire in their heart, I can temper them. It's like it's having fire and you put it inside of a blowtorch. You can do something with that. Other people they're afraid of their own shadow and they're always nervous, and you put fire under them and it's like getting smoke out of wet logs. You get fire underneath them, you get rump roast. Thank you, finally. They finally laugh at my jokes. I keep telling them, they're funny. So we're in search of a certain character type. It's that hardcore meets the lunatic fringe, meets devoted to Christ, meets a passion for justice. And they're willing to sacrifice to get there. For the sake of others, for the sake of their own children and their own offspring. Those were the people, that exact type that fought for the American Revolution, that gave us America. So for these next 3 episodes, we're going to look at 6 distinct social revolutions in American history. We're going to look at the rhetoric, say rhetoric. Rhetoric. That means the words that they used. We're going to look at the images. Images? Images. All right, that's the things that they put out in print or the photographs they used. Next is going to be the actions. Actions. Stuff they did. Crazy stuff. Cool stuff. Really cool stuff. And then we're going to look at the sacrifices that they made. Say that word. Sacrifices. It's not always easy. And then we will look at the fruit. The fruit. There was an end. There was something that happened as a result of what they did that stood the test of time. And that is what we want in our revolution to end the killing of children. Now, let's start with the Stamp Act. The Stamp Act literally is why we have an America. The British wanted to raise some money from the American colonies, so in 1765 they passed a law that said for any document to be legal, it had to have the stamp on it. Newspapers, wills, deeds, any type of paper transaction had to have the official stamp on it. And it was going to be self-enforcing, which meant that you wouldn't even have to have a lot of people enforce it, simply because your document would not be legally binding if it didn't have the stamp on it. So if you wanted to sell your house and you wanted to buy a house and you wanted to transfer a deed, if it didn't have the stamp, it wasn't a legally binding document. So both of you are going to insist that that stamp is on it, hence you're going to have to pay for the stamp, and that's how they were going to raise the money, raise the revenue. Well, most of the colonies said, that's horrible, that stinks, that's not fair. There's no one over there representing us. How did they get to vote? Well, what are we going to do? We're British citizens, okay. Except for one young man named Patrick Henry, 29 years old. He's from the backwoods of Virginia, not well known. He had one famous case, the Parsons cause, but he wasn't a part of the elite. And he has the guts to introduce 5 resolutions in the Virginia lower house, and there's this massive debate. So listen to the rhetoric. Resolved that the General Assembly of this colony have the only and sole exclusive right and power to lay taxes and depositions upon the inhabitants of this colony, and every attempt to vest such power in any person or persons whatsoever has a manifest tendency to destroy British as well as American freedom. What he was saying was, you can't say to the Parliament of England that they can pass a law to tax us if we're not represented there. That makes us their slaves. And that's what they said in the debates. This was treasonous, people. This made people afraid. So he's debating his resolutions on the floor, and he's arguing for them, and he said, and I quote, Caesar had his Brutus, Charles I, his Cromwell, and George III, and then the Speaker of the House shouted, treason, treason. The House was coming unglued. People were yelling and screaming. Because, for those of you who don't know history, when he said Caesar had his Brutus, Brutus killed Caesar. And Charles I, his Cromwell, well, Cromwell killed Charles I. So he's talking about tyrannicide here. He's talking about tyrants who were killed. And he says, and George III, and people were like, I can't believe he's even saying this. I mean, picture somebody talking about killing a sitting president or killing a sitting prime minister of England. It's treasonous speech. Literally. He makes this speech, and they're yelling, treason, treason. And he goes, and George III may profit by their example. If this be treason, make the most of it. That's a gutsy dude, man. So the resolution's passed by one vote. Word goes, I mean, the riders take off that night, literally taking the news to Boston, to Philadelphia, to New York. Word spread like wildfire that somebody had the guts to resist the Stamp Act.
Among my various friends from the past, Abe Lincoln is a favorite. And on one occasion, he told me that he really admired Randall's hair.
And Jesus said, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat, so practice and observe whatever they tell you, but not what they do. They preach, but they do not practice. They bind heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with their finger.
Hello again. We're continuing with the history, philosophy, and theology of social revolution in America, how we can get this country back. Let's continue with the Stamp Act and then go on to the Boston Tea Party from Insurrecta next. Enjoy.
Well, this set a series of wheels in motion. Another group had this resolution: resolved that anybody who shall, by speaking or writing, assert or maintain that any person or persons other than the General Assembly of this colony — it was a different colony — have the right or power to impose or lay any taxation on the people here shall be deemed an enemy to His Majesty's colony. Then the Sons of Liberty began to get traction. This is a group of just total patriot renegades. Resolved that whoever is concerned, directly or indirectly, in using or causing to be used in any way or manner whatever within this colony, unless authorized by the General Assembly thereof, those detestable papers called stamps shall be deemed to all intents and purposes an enemy to his country, and by the Sons of Liberty treated accordingly. This is an ominous, not too subtle threat at this point. So, images. The stamp that the British had was this beautiful crown with all of this artwork around it. So the Patriots, the Americans, created one that looked like it, only had a skull and crossbone over the king's crown, like the king was trying to bring death to the Americans, to the Americas. This is really, these images were really, really incendiary. What did they do? They started to rattle the Stamp Act collectors. There were stamp collectors that were hired by the British. They were Americans, but they were going to just be the ones that sold the stamps. One guy, they tarred and feathered. Another one, they burned in effigy. You heard of the Liberty Tree? That tree was made famous because one of the stamp collectors lived within eyesight of that tree, and in the middle of the night, they took a dummy, that's effigy, they took a dummy and they dressed him like him, and they hung him in effigy, not him actually, not the guy, but hung his dummy. And another one, they hoisted by his waist, mocking him in a public square. Every single stamp collector quit. All of them. They all quit. And now, there were sacrifices and there were fruits. The sacrifices, well, and by the way, the stamps were never used. Not one was ever used legally. They were burned. The Patriots got a hold of them and burned them. Others were taken and thrown overboard in the harbors where they were sitting. That is the fruit of one speech by one young man, Patrick Henry, 29 years old. You want to know why I'm desperate to find young people who, remember, like I said, it's easier to temper a bold man? You want to know why I'm desperate to find young people who are filled with boldness? Because they're the ones who have the idealism and the passion and the courage to change the course of history. And as we're going to see with all of the revolutions in America that we look at, it's primarily the young. I'm right on the outer edge. I mean, I'm 35 years old. I mean, there's not much time left for me to be young. Why are you laughing? Now you laugh. What? All right, I'm 36.
What is the use of living, if it be not to strive for noble causes and to make this muddled world a better place to live after we are gone? Sir Winston Churchill. Hi, friend, I'm Randall Terry. We all know that the Tea Party movement is big right now. Where did it get its name? The Boston Tea Party. The lessons learned there are worth their weight in gold. Enjoy.
Well, the social revolutions of America's past helped break tyranny time and time again. We're finishing up right now with the Stamp Act. We saw the images that they used. We heard about some of their actions. We saw some of their words, their rhetoric. There were sacrifices. These men who were the leaders of these little bands, they were now marked. The British government marked them. And there was one good fruit and one that became a sword that hung over their head. The good fruit politically was that Parliament in England got the message. And in March of '66, they repealed the Stamp Act. And on the same day, they passed a law that said Parliament had the authority to regulate, to pass any law it wanted. This is a paraphrase, but Parliament in England had the authority to pass any law it wanted in regards to the colonies. That's all it said in content. Basically, they said, okay, you won this round, we'll be back. And unfortunately, they were. We had the Townsend Acts, we had various laws that were passed to tax glass, to tax lead, and one by one these were repealed, but they started to send over more troops. Unrest began to grow. You heard of the Boston Massacre? That followed a couple of years down the road, 1770, that followed the Stamp Act. But the tensions were increasing because of the Stamp Act, because of the Sons of Liberty, because of the Committees of Correspondence. These things that are part of the very fiber of American history brought conflict, confrontation, controversy. So there was good fruit, and then there was some difficult fruit. In social revolution, you've got to remember that. It's not always linear. There are prices to be paid along the way that are very horrific and distasteful, as we're going to see with all 6 of these. The Boston Massacre was horrible. So, and then finally, of course, this set the wheels in motion. The fruit was that it set the wheels in motion for the American Revolution.
Arise, O Lord. O God, lift up thy hand. Forget not the afflicted. The hapless commits himself to thee. Thou hast been the helper of the fatherless. Break thou the arm of the wicked and evildoer. Seek out his wickedness till thou find none.
The next one is the Boston Tea Party. Remember I said that they passed taxes on glass and on lead? Well, one by one, these are repealed because the colonists at this point were saying, we're not going to let you tax us unless we have representation in Parliament. So they left the tea tax. So the Americas said, we're not taking your tea. We will boycott British tea, and we will smuggle in tea, even if it costs us more. So they were smuggling in tea through Holland, and the Brits had a tea company going out of business. They lowered the price of the tax so much that the tea could come in, including tax, and be cheaper than the tea that Americans could buy anywhere. So the Brits are thinking, all right, we've got them now. They want tea. They're going to buy it no matter what. And if we introduce it at such a low cost, even with the tax built into it, they're going to cave in and they're going to start buying the tea, and then we won. And then they'll get used to paying taxes to us on our terms. And so the Sons of Liberty said, no, we see what you're up to. So when the ships landed, the word started to go out, the tea is here, we can't take the tea. There was worry that people were going to crack and start buying it. Listen to this rhetoric. The hour of destruction, a manly opposition to the machinations of tyranny, stares you in the face. Every friend to his country, to himself and to his posterity, is now called upon to meet in Faneuil Hall at 9 o'clock this day, at which time the bells will ring to make a united and successful resistance to this last, worst, and most destructive measure of the administration. These are the words of revolution. The hour has come, that worst of plagues, the detested tea, has arrived in this hour. They called it the worst of plagues, detested tea. They were trying to stir people up with their rhetoric. And they're using their rhetoric to say, look, this isn't just about paying a penny on tea and you get the tea cheaper. This is about you becoming slaves. This is about your liberty being destroyed. Come, we have this staring us in the face. We are going to rise up against it for our sake, for the sake of our children, for our posterity. This is the rhetoric of heroism. This is the rhetoric of revolution. This is the rhetoric of resistance. Images. Picture the Indians that walked through that night. Do you know what happened? The Indians walked through that night. In the middle of the meeting, there was, some accounts say, somewhere between 25 and 40 Indians coming through the back door, silent, with their tomahawks out. They walk down the middle aisle, and then they walk out the side. And the room goes totally quiet, and they just watch them. Now, of course, they're not really Indians. They're Americans who've painted their faces and put on Indian clothing, carrying Indian tomahawks because they've got a plan.
I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. If you want to order the series Insurrecta Next, look at the screen when I leave and you'll see where to get it. Get the whole 14-part episode. It will change your life and it will change the country. God bless you.